The Forgotten Legends. For thousands of years, the galaxy had forgotten about humans. They were nothing more than myths, whispered in the darkest corners of history. Old war records spoke of a species that once burned through the stars, feared and respected by all. But those records were ancient, buried under centuries of new conquests. No one had seen a human in ages. To the great empires of the galaxy, humanity was nothing more than a story, one that had long faded into legend. The Tselveni Empire, the most dominant power in the known universe, ruled over hundreds of planets. They prided themselves on their superior fleet, their unmatched technology, and their unchallenged control over space. To them, there was no force that could oppose them. The idea that an extinct species could ever pose a threat was ridiculous. And so, when their explorers stumbled upon a distant, ruined system, they thought little of it. The system was old, abandoned, and lifeless. The Tselveni scans showed broken planets, shattered moons, and the remnants of what seemed to be artificial structures floating in space. No energy readings, no movement, just silence. Their warships moved in without hesitation, ready to claim another forgotten sector of the galaxy. The Tselveni High Commander, Valor, stood on the bridge of his massive flagship, the Dominion's Wrath. His golden armor gleamed under the artificial lights, his red eyes scanning the desolate system. He smirked. So this is the so-called lost system that our ancestors feared. He scoffed, shaking his head. Nothing but dust and dead rocks. His officers chuckled in agreement. But then, something strange happened. Their scanners, which had been silent, suddenly flared with activity. Deep within the ruins of a broken planet, an ancient signal activated, a pulse of energy that spread through the system like a ripple in water. It wasn't a distress beacon. It wasn't a call for help. It was a warning. The Tselveni officers frowned as the message began broadcasting across all channels. It was old, so old that their translation systems struggled to decode it. But when they finally understood the message, their laughter stopped. To all who enter this space, leave immediately. This is a restricted human sector. Trespassers will not be given mercy. A cold silence filled the bridge. Valor's second-in-command, General Keleth, narrowed his eyes. A human transmission. Impossible. They are extinct. Valor scoffed. Obviously, it's just an old automated message. The humans are long dead. There is no one left to enforce such a warning. But something didn't feel right. The ruins weren't just random debris. They were defensive outposts, arranged in a pattern that suggested a deeper purpose. The shattered moons weren't just accidents of time. They were deliberately destroyed, as if someone had tried to cover their tracks. And the silence, it wasn't natural. It was the kind of silence that waited. As the fleet pushed forward, the signal changed. It acknowledged their presence. The Tselveni fleet had triggered something. And beneath the surface of a long-dead planet, deep inside the ruins of an ancient human base, something woke up. The Tselveni fleet moved cautiously into the heart of the system, drawn in by the strange pulse they had detected. Their ships, once brimming with confidence, now seemed to hesitate as the silence around them grew heavier. The ancient warning echoed in the back of their minds, but their arrogance blinded them. The humans were gone. This was nothing more than an old relic of a forgotten past. But then it happened. The Dominion's Wrath was the first to feel it, a sudden jolt that rattled its hull. The ship's systems flickered as a deep rumble shook the massive vessel. On the bridge, Valor's eyes widened in disbelief. The hum of his ship's engines faltered, and the lights dimmed for a brief moment. A shiver of unease passed through the crew. "Report," Valor snapped, his voice steady but laced with confusion. The sensor officer quickly checked the readings. His face went pale. "Sir, we're receiving an energy surge, massive and directed." The officer's voice faltered as a strange image appeared on the holoscreen, a dark shape emerging from the ruins, its form almost hidden by the shadow of the destroyed planets. It was colossal, a silhouette that dwarfed their ships, and the energy readings spiked with unnatural intensity. General Killith stood up, his hand gripping the back of his seat. "What is that?" Before the officer could answer, the image began to clear. The shadow on the screen began to reveal a massive structure. An ancient human dreadnought, long thought to be a myth, its surface scorched by time, yet still terrifyingly intact. The ship was unlike anything that Selveni had ever seen. Its design was crude by modern standards, but its size and form radiated power. It was an ancient warship, built for destruction. Vaylor's mind raced. He had heard rumors of such ships, tales passed down through ancient texts. The humans had once commanded fleets like no other, their technology lost to time. But this was something alive, a ship that had somehow endured for centuries, waiting in the darkness for someone foolish enough to disturb it. "Impossible," Vaylor muttered under his breath. The humans didn't build ships like this. They were primitives. But his words were drowned out by the sound of a massive engine ignition. The dreadnought's engines, though rusted and ancient, roared to life. With a terrifying growl, the colossal ship began to move, slowly at first, as if it had been asleep for centuries, but with undeniable purpose. As the ship stirred, a sudden barrage of energy blasts erupted from its hull, massive waves of power that lit up the darkness of space. The Selveni fleet scattered in panic, desperately trying to avoid the blasts. One of the smaller ships wasn't fast enough. A single energy beam struck it head-on, disintegrating the vessel in a burst of light. The Selveni fleet was no longer just in danger, they were under attack. Vaylor's voice was hoarse, almost a whisper of disbelief. What kind of ship is this?" The general beside him answered with a grim face. "This is no ordinary ship. It's a relic of the humans. And it's just as dangerous as the legends said." But that was only the beginning. As the fleet scrambled to regroup, more ships began to emerge from the ruins. Dreadnoughts, cruisers, corvettes, a whole fleet, hidden for 500,000 years, now fully operational and ready to unleash their fury. The Selveni had no idea how the humans had survived, or why their ships had been left dormant for so long. But there was no denying it now. The humans were back. And their ships were not the forgotten, outdated relics the galaxy had once thought them to be. They were living, breathing instruments of destruction, powered by an ancient and incomprehensible force. The once dominant Selveni fleet was no longer the galaxy's terror. They were the hunted. Vaylor clenched his fists, his mind spinning with possibilities. He had underestimated humanity. He had thought them weak, obsolete, and irrelevant. But now, the truth was clear. The humans had never truly disappeared. They had just been waiting, hidden in the shadows, and now their fleet had risen to reclaim their place among the stars. With a growl, Vaylor ordered his fleet to attack. But even as he gave the command, he knew in his gut that they were already too late. The humans had returned, and the galaxy would never be the same again. The Selveni fleet was in chaos. They had arrived expecting to scavenge an abandoned system, a relic of an extinct species. Instead, they had awoken something far worse, a fleet of ancient human warships, fully operational and now moving with intent. Admiral Vaylor gritted his teeth as alarms blared across the Dominion's wrath. Every sensor on his ship was screaming warnings, heat signatures, power surges, weapons priming. The humans' fleet was alive, and it was preparing for war. All ships formed defensive formations. Vaylor barked, trying to regain control. The Selveni fleet repositioned, their sleek warships maneuvering into attack patterns. Energy weapons charged, missile bays primed. They still outnumbered these ancient ships. Surely, with their modern technology, they could outmatch them. But the humans' dreadnoughts did not act like relics. They moved, not sluggishly, not like ships that had been dormant for 500,000 years. They moved like predators, methodical and unstoppable. The lead dreadnought, a massive black titan, adjusted its course slightly, as if studying its prey. Then it fired. A single blast erupted from its hull, not an energy beam, not a plasma bolt, but something far more terrifying. It was a pulse of raw force, almost invisible, a distortion in space itself. The blast slammed into a Xelveni cruiser. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, without warning, the ship's hull imploded, folding in on itself as if crushed by an unseen hand. No explosion, no fire, just erasure. Silence filled the Xelveni command deck. "By the stars," General Killith whispered, his voice trembling. The humans' technology. It was beyond anything that Xelveni had seen. This wasn't some old, forgotten fleet. This was something different. Something that had evolved in secrecy, away from the galaxy's eyes. They've been hiding," Vaylor muttered, realization dawning on him. For 500,000 years, the humans hadn't died out. They had prepared. And now, their weapons were unlike anything the galaxy had ever known. More dreadnoughts joined the assault. Their weapons didn't fire with the chaotic fury of a desperate force. They attacked with cold precision, striking where the Xelveni fleet was weakest. One by one, ships began to vanish, some torn apart by unseen forces, others ripped from reality itself. The Xelveni fleet tried to fight back. They unleashed their most powerful weapons: plasma lances, ion torpedoes, nuclear warheads, but the human warships adapted. Their shields absorbed energy, their hulls twisted to deflect impacts, and their weapons retaliated with relentless destruction. "This is impossible," a Xelveni officer cried. "Their ships are too old. How are they defeating us?" Vaylor clenched his fists. He had miscalculated. The humans weren't just survivors. They were beyond anything he had ever imagined. And worst of all, they were just getting started. The largest dreadnought, its hull marked with the faded sigil of Earth's lost empire, turned its weapons toward the Dominion's wrath. Its main cannon began to charge, a low hum filling the void of space. Vaylor knew what was coming. He had seen entire planets fall to lesser weapons. "Full retreat," he ordered. The Xelveni fleet began to flee. But the humans weren't finished yet. The dreadnoughts gave chase, their engines roaring as they pursued their ancient enemies. The Xelveni had come here expecting an easy conquest. Instead, they had unleashed hell itself. And now, the last remnants of humanity were hunting them down. The Xelveni fleet was in full retreat, but the humans did not let them go. Admiral Vaylor watched in horror as the ancient dreadnoughts pursued them like predators hunting wounded prey. The Xelveni ships, once symbols of power, now fled like frightened animals, their once proud formations broken, their strategies useless. "How are they keeping up?" one of his officers shouted. The Xelveni ships were faster, more maneuverable. By all logic, they should have outrun the humans easily. But somehow, the dreadnoughts moved in ways that defied all known physics. They shifted without inertia, turned at impossible angles, and bent space as if they were rewriting reality itself. Then came the second wave of destruction. A human battleship, smaller than the dreadnoughts but still a terrifying behemoth, fired its weapons. But this was not a normal attack. A black tear formed in space ahead of the Xelveni cruisers, like a hole in reality itself. The nearest ship, the Razor of Dominion, had no time to adjust course. It collided with the tear and vanished. Not destroyed, not vaporized, just gone. "By the void, what is that?" General Killith screamed. Vaylor felt his blood turn cold. These were not simple energy weapons or missiles. These were technologies beyond anything that Xelveni Empire had ever encountered. And the humans were using them without hesitation. Across the battlefield, more Xelveni ships disappeared. Some were shattered into nothingness. Others were folded into themselves like crumpled paper. It was as if the very fabric of the universe obeyed the will of these ancient warships. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission," a communications officer cried. For the first time since the battle had begun, the humans were speaking. A deep, calm voice filled the command deck of the Dominion's Wrath. It was human, but the tone carried something ancient, something cold. Selvani fleet, you have trespassed upon forbidden space. This system is under the protection of the Terran Warden Initiative. Surrender now, or you will not leave this battlefield. A cold chill ran through Vaylor's spine. Terran Warden Initiative. That name had never been recorded in any historical files. Human fleet. This is Admiral Vaylor of the Selvani Dominion, he said, trying to keep his voice steady. We were not aware that this system was claimed. We are willing to negotiate. Negotiation was an option before you fired upon us. The human voice interrupted. Now you will answer for your crimes. Suddenly, the largest dreadnought, a monstrous ship covered in battle scars that spanned millennia, moved forward. It was an executioner stepping toward its prisoner. They're locking weapons on us. Vaylor made a choice. All ships, scatter. Get out of here. Now. That Selvani fleet broke apart, abandoning all formations, all tactics. Every ship activated emergency warp drives, attempting to flee before the human warships erased them from existence. But the humans were not done yet. One last terrifying event unfolded. As the Selvani ships initiated warp jumps, the human dreadnought fired something new. Not a weapon, not an explosion, but a pulse of energy that rippled across space. The warp tunnels collapsed. Ships that had begun their jump were ripped out of hyperspace, thrown violently back into real space. Some were torn apart by the sheer force. Others emerged half inside planets or asteroids, their hulls crushed instantly. Only a handful of Selvani ships managed to escape. Vaylor's ship, the Dominion's Wrath, was one of them. As they fled at maximum speed, he took one last look at the human fleet, now looming over the battlefield like gods of destruction. "Sir," an officer whispered, trembling, "what do we tell the High Command?" Vaylor swallowed hard. There was only one answer. "Tell them," he said slowly, staring at the wreckage of his once mighty fleet. "Humanity is back." Vaylor sat in his chair, staring blankly at the screen, the image of the human warship still vivid in his mind. His hands trembled, not from fear, but from the overwhelming realization of what had just happened. His empire, the great Selvani Dominion, with its countless victories and immeasurable strength, had been utterly shattered in the blink of an eye by a force he barely understood. His mind raced. What had humanity become? How could a species, thought to be long extinct, wield such power? The humans were more than just survivors. They were wielders of a force that no one, not even the might of the Selvani, could withstand. "Admiral," a voice broke his thoughts. It was his first officer, Commander Shea. She was standing stiffly at the entrance, her face pale and her voice steady, but there was no hiding the shock in her eyes. "We've received a communication from the High Command. They want an immediate report." Vaylor closed his eyes. He knew that report would not be easy, but they had no choice. He stood up slowly, feeling the weight of his decisions press down on him. His people were counting on him, even if they didn't know how bad things truly were. He looked to Commander Shah, his voice hard but with an edge of resignation. "Send the report, but tell them the truth. Humanity is no longer a myth. The humans are back, and we are not prepared for what they have become." Back in the heart of the Selvani High Command, the leaders of the Empire were already debating their next move. The emergency communication from Admiral Vaylor had stunned them all into silence, but as the full scope of the disaster settled in, panic began to spread. The Selvani had faced countless enemies throughout their history, but never anything like this. "Admiral Vaylor has failed," the Grand Commander said, his voice cold. "The human fleet has shown us their power. We cannot underestimate them any longer." But not everyone was so quick to surrender. General Karish, a fierce and battle-hardened veteran of many wars, stood up, his expression hard. "We have to strike back," he declared. "The Selvani have survived countless challenges. This is no different. We will destroy these human ships, just as we've destroyed others." A murmur of agreement rippled through the room, but the High Counselor, a figure known for his cautious nature, raised a hand to silence them. "We are no longer dealing with a regular enemy," he said. "These humans are not like anything we faced. The power they wield, the technology at their disposal, this is not something we can fight head-on." "Then what do we do?" Karish demanded. "We can't just sit back and let them claim our territory. We cannot allow them to destroy us without a fight." The High Counselor looked grim. "We need to learn more. We need to understand who these humans are, what they've become, and what drives them. If we act rashly, we will be destroyed. But if we are patient, we may yet have a chance." Back on the edge of the galaxy, the human fleet was silent, their ships floating in the vastness of space, as if waiting for something. Aboard the flagship Terran Emperor, Admiral Elias Wren stood in front of the main view screen, staring at the swirling nebula in front of him. The battle had been won, but he knew that this victory was only a small step toward something far bigger. "Admiral," a voice broke through the silence. It was his second-in-command, Commander Lyrakan. "That Selvani have been contacting us. They're sending envoys, trying to negotiate a peace." Admiral Wren's face darkened. "They'll want to talk, but we've already shown them what we can do. It's not peace they're after. They're calculating, trying to figure out how to survive this." "But should we listen?" Commander Khan asked. "We've already won the battle. The Selvani fleet is in disarray. What's the point of negotiation now?" "We've defeated them," Wren agreed. "But the galaxy is large, and the Selvani are not the only threat. We need to understand their weaknesses, their fears. If we don't, we could be walking into another trap." Back in the Selvani Dominion, the High Command continued to deliberate. The vast fleet was being reorganized, repairs were being made, and new tactics were being discussed. But the shadow of the human fleet loomed over them all, a reminder that their time of unchecked dominance was over. The High Counselor looked out at the stars from his command chair, his thoughts heavy. He had always believed that the Selvani were untouchable. That belief had just been shattered. The humans weren't just a new threat. They were a force of nature, a storm that could tear apart empires. "What will we do now?" he murmured to himself, watching as the stars outside began to shift and change. "What will we do now that the humans have returned?" The answer was clear. They had no choice but to adapt, to learn quickly and strike at the heart of humanity's power before it could grow too great. It was a race against time, and every day the humans' fleet grew stronger. The galaxy was on the edge of a new era, one where humanity's name would echo through the stars once more. But would the Selvani be ready for it? Or would they be consumed by the very power they had tried to suppress? The battle for the galaxy had only just begun. The days after the victory over the Selvani were filled with uneasy silence. The human fleet lingered at the edges of the galaxy, watching and waiting. But it wasn't just the humans who were preparing. The galaxy itself was on the verge of transformation, and every faction, every empire, knew that the Selvani defeat was just the beginning. Admiral Elias Wren sat in his quarters aboard the Terran Emperor, the flagship of humanity's resurgence. His eyes were tired, his mind focused on the task ahead. The battle had been won, but the true fight was still to come. "Admiral, we've received more intelligence reports," Commander Khan said as she entered, her face tight with concern. "The Selvani aren't giving up. They're regrouping, and word is spreading. There are whispers of other fleets in the galaxy, fleets that have been dormant for centuries." Wren didn't flinch at the news. He had expected as much. The Selvani may have been shattered, but there were always others lurking in the darkness. Others who had been waiting for a moment like this, when their enemies were distracted, when their guard was down. Humanity's return had disrupted the balance, and that meant the galaxy was going to be plunged into a new era of chaos. "We've got to move fast," Wren said, standing up and walking toward the view screen. The stars outside seemed distant and cold, but his eyes were hard as they scanned the vastness of space. We need to take advantage of our momentum. If we wait too long, the galaxy will start to unite against us. Admiral, there's more, Commander Khan continued. The Tselveni aren't the only ones reacting. Several of the old galactic powers are starting to move as well. The Varen have been seen in the area, and the Kryn have sent scouts. They know we're here, and they're not taking it lightly. Ren took a deep breath. He had been prepared for this. The victory against the Tselveni had sent shockwaves through the galaxy, and now the other empires were coming to investigate, to see for themselves what had just been unleashed. The humans had been a myth for centuries. Now, they were a reality. We don't have the luxury of time, Ren said, his voice firm. It's time to show the galaxy what we can do. The human fleet isn't just powerful, it's unstoppable. We have to keep pressing forward, keep them on the defensive. Let them come to us, and we'll make sure they regret it. Back on the Tselveni homeworld, the High Counselor was not sleeping any better than the humans. His people were in disarray, their fleets scattered across the galaxy, and their pride shattered. The humans had brought their empire to its knees in a single battle, something that Tselveni thought impossible. But the High Counselor knew that pride could be a powerful weapon. He was a strategist, a master of politics and war. He would not let his people fade into obscurity. The Tselveni would rise again, but they would need allies, old allies who could help them face this new threat. He had already sent envoys to the Varen and the Kryn, urging them to join forces. He spoke of the danger the humans posed to the balance of the galaxy. The galaxy's ancient powers could not afford to let a single species rise to dominate it. The High Counselor knew that if they didn't act quickly, humanity would grow too powerful. He looked at the holographic map of the galaxy before him. The human fleet was still far from his borders, but it would not be long before they came to him. He had to be ready. The Tselveni had one last chance to show the galaxy that they were still a force to be reckoned with. They would rally their allies, gather their strength, and push humanity back before it was too late. Meanwhile, on the human fleet, Admiral Ren was preparing for the inevitable. The whispers were growing louder. The galaxy had heard the stories of humanity's return, and they were not taking it lightly. Empires were stirring, fleets were forming, and the galaxy was becoming a powder keg, ready to explode. Ren stood in front of the communications console, his gaze cold as he watched the data streaming in. The Varen, a race known for their cunning and their ruthless tactics, were moving toward the human border. The Kryn, a brutal warrior species, had also begun to marshal their forces. It was only a matter of time before the galaxy's powers would unite against humanity. We can't fight them all at once, Commander Khan said, her voice grim. We don't have the resources yet. If we're not careful, we could find ourselves fighting a war on too many fronts. I know, Ren replied, his voice low. But we can't just sit back and wait. We need to make them think twice before they attack. We have to show them that humanity's return isn't something they can ignore. We need to strike first, before they strike at us. As the human fleet moved into battle formation, Ren knew one thing for sure. This was not going to be a fight for survival. It was going to be a fight for the future of the galaxy. Humanity was back, and it wasn't going to be pushed into the shadows again. In the deep reaches of space, as the Varen and Kryn fleets prepared to confront the humans, the galaxy was beginning to hold its breath. The battle lines were being drawn, and the stage was set for a conflict that would reshape the course of history. No one knew how it would end, but everyone knew that humanity's return would be the spark that ignited it all. The universe was on the brink of a new era, and as the human fleet set its course, one thing was clear. This war would not just be about victory or defeat. It would be about survival, and who would control the future of the galaxy. The galaxy was on the brink of chaos, and humanity was at the center of it all. The time for subtlety had passed. The human fleet had arrived, and they would no longer hide in the shadows of myth and legend. It was no longer just about fighting for survival. It was about establishing a place among the stars. Admiral Elias Wren stood on the bridge of the Terran Emperor, his eyes scanning the vast expanse of space. The Varan and Kryn fleets were gathering on the borders of human space, poised to strike. The stars outside seemed cold and unfeeling, but to Wren, they felt alive with potential. The fate of the galaxy hung in the balance, and humanity had no choice but to face what was coming. "We're ready, sir," Commander Khan said, her voice steady but filled with tension. "Our fleet is fully armed and in position. The enemy is closing in, and we got one shot at this." Wren nodded. He had known this moment would come. When the galaxy's ancient powers rose to challenge humanity's return, they would not go down without a fight. The Varan and Kryn were ruthless, calculating, and battle-hardened. But humanity had something they didn't: resolve. "We've trained for this," Wren said, his voice calm but filled with determination. "Now we show them what humanity is capable of." As the fleets assembled in the depths of space, the first shots were fired, breaking the silence. The galaxy trembled as the human fleet and the forces of the Varan and Kryn collided in a fierce, relentless battle. Ships exploded in brilliant bursts of light, their wreckage scattered across the dark expanse. The battle was brutal, but the humans fought with a fury that left their enemies stunned. The human dreadnoughts, massive ships of war that had once been thought impossible, cut through the enemy lines like a hot knife through butter. Their firepower was overwhelming, and the Varan and Kryn forces had no answer. The ships that had once been the pride of the galaxy's most powerful empires were now crumbling under the might of humanity's weapons. Admiral Wren watched as the battle unfolded, his mind calculating each move with precision. The human fleet was using every advantage they had, overwhelming the enemy with speed, tactics, and sheer firepower. It was working, but the battle was far from over. "We're gaining ground, but we're not finished yet," Wren muttered to himself. "We need to end this now." The Terran Emperor moved forward, cutting through the enemy forces like a sword through flesh. Wren could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on him. Every decision counted. The fate of humanity and the galaxy rested on the outcome of this battle. "We've got a breach in Sector 4. Commander Khan called out. "Enemy ships are slipping through." Wren's eyes narrowed. This was the kind of situation he had feared. One small slip, and the tide of the battle could turn in an instant. But he wasn't about to let that happen. "Redirect fire to Sector 4, Wren ordered, his voice sharp. "We're not giving them a chance." The human fleet responded in perfect synchronization, turning their focus to the new threat. The massive guns of the Terran Emperor fired, and the Varan and Kryn ships in Sector 4 were torn apart in a blaze of destruction. The enemy was stunned. They had underestimated humanity's firepower, and now they were paying the price. But Wren knew the battle was far from over. The Varan and Kryn were still fighting back with everything they had. The human fleet was strong, but it couldn't let its guard down. This was the final push, the moment when everything would either be lost or won. The human ships closed in on the last of the enemy forces, their firepower relentless. The Varan and Kryn had no choice but to retreat, their fleets shattered and broken. The human dreadnoughts had torn through their defenses with brutal efficiency, and now the survivors were fleeing into the depths of space, leaving humanity victorious. As the battle drew to a close, the stars once again grew quiet. The silence was deafening, but to Admiral Wren, it was a sound of triumph. Humanity had fought against impossible odds, and they had emerged victorious. The galaxy would never be the same. Wren stood on the bridge, staring out at the stars. It was over. For now, the human fleet had proven its strength, but this victory was only the beginning. The galaxy would never forget the day that humanity's dreadnoughts had appeared, and neither would Wren. They had shown the galaxy that they were no longer myths. They were a force to be reckoned with. "Report," Wren said, his voice steady as he turned to Khan. "The enemy has retreated, sir," she said. "We've won." Ren's eyes softened for a moment. "We've won today, but there's still much to be done. The galaxy has seen our power, but we must ensure they know we will not hesitate to use it again if necessary." The future of the galaxy was now in humanity's hands. The dreadnoughts had shattered the pride of the ancient empires, but they had also paved the way for something new. The question was no longer about survival, it was about dominance. Humanity had emerged from the darkness, and now it would shape the future of the stars. The battle was won, but the war was just beginning.